Continuing on, let's take a look at this one. Love this image. I think this is a really strong opening image. I like what you've done with your title. I think that really stands out and looks nice. With something like this, you may experiment a little bit and see if there's a way and I don't know, we can just duplicate the spread and try it out. See if there's a way that you can maybe shrink this in or make this slightly smaller so that this is just on the wood as opposed to having just the cue starting on the plate. Because what ends up happening is your attention definitely goes right towards that area because it's the strongest contrast. So you may experiment with that a little bit. And then you might make the name a little bit smaller and possibly shrink the size of your folio just a little bit so it's not quite as strong. All right, really like your organization and stuff that's here. The pull quote looks nice behind here. I like your subheadings. This part here gets a little funky. You may want to experiment with cropping this or maybe even moving the pictures so that they maybe bleed and they're even all the way out like here. So that the pictures take up this space so that right here, the photo doesn't drop down into the text. You may also want to play around with getting it to wherever the bottom of your text is, it should be lined up and then have the photo lined up with that as well. So basically just kick that one up just a little ways. Here, not having that lined up is fine, but down here, see how this one drops below and then it drops up. It just creates this kind of odd shape that starts to happen here. So you want to play around with that so that part doesn't happen. And then the last thing to really tweak with a little bit is with the columns of text, you may want to reword or play around with the spacing so that they don't end with one word. It's what's known as an orphan, and the college will take a point off for every single one of those. So just here alone, and I'm going to go over that later, but just right here alone, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you'll want to play around with the spacing on that so that it doesn't end with one word. You can go in and edit the text if you want to remove words, add text to put more stuff in there, but just fix that part. All right. If you have other questions, just let me know. Okay. Excellent. Basketball fun. Okay, excellent. Okay, so a couple of things here that I really like. I love the fact, you've got good images and stuff that are here, and you've got, the text kind of pulling in the colors from the uniform. So I think that works really nicely. What I'd really like to do is play around more with the second spread and see if you can find additional pictures to use instead of having it just be the back with their number. Because one of the key things with both of these players is they're incredibly dynamic. And the plays, the dunks that they do, there's got to be pictures online of some amazing showing how unearthly their abilities are. Show that off. They're too static. There's nothing really happening. They're standing. They're sitting. They're standing there with their backs. There's the epicness of both of these players. You've got to find some photos that really showcase that. Then on this backside one, see if you can play around with breaking up the text so that it's not all of the pictures are necessarily just across the top. Maybe you mix it up, put some at the bottom. Maybe you run them on the side. Maybe you run them on this side. Play around with it a little bit and then see what you can do to get the pull quotes in here and be able to give yourself some space between the photo and where the text starts so that there's a little bit more of a gap. So something like, what that will do is that lets the pictures breathe a little bit and lets the text not feel like it's coming right up against the photos. And then you may play around with stylizing and making the King James part a little fancier and then his airness a little fancier. And since you're emphasizing the fact that they both have, the 23 on here, maybe it's incorporating the 2 3s somewhere. I don't know. Just some thoughts. All right, let's take a look at this next one. Really like the opening here. I like that you utilize the entire page for one big photo. I think that looks really nice. I like the larger scale BTS here and the global takeover here. You may want to pull global and takeover a little bit closer together and maybe play around with the color so it's not just straight black. Maybe it's a color behind. Maybe it's the color in the text. Maybe it's a drop shadow with color. Just something to help add a little bit of color to that. Now, down here, really like what you've done with bleeding the photos to the outside. I think that worked out really nicely. You've got good, clean text here. That was a fun idea of including the drop cap to be the first 3 letters, which makes sense because of the name. Your headings, your subheadings look good. I like your pull quote. Yeah, you've got a really nice, strong set of layouts here. I like the consistency of the columns being the same size, stopping and ending at the same point, having the same amount of space between there. You may experiment, and this will take a little bit of tweaking, but experiment with full justification on the fonts, like duplicate this spread so you don't mess up the original, and then play around with full justification and see what kind of gaps get created. And then if you need help fixing that, just let me know. All right, next one here. So with this, what I would lean towards doing when I first saw this is the text is really big. What I want to do is shrink the font size. Your font size for your body copy should be like 9 or 10 points. That's it. This looks much larger. It looks like it's maybe like a 12. Also, you're stopping at the margin on every single piece. So that little pink line, feel free to go beyond that. Expand this thing so that it covers the entire thing. So if you're going to have something that's got the color, bleed it all the way out. Have it go all the way out to the edge, or have just one side going all the way out to the edge. And then go big, go strong, and have the photo. Right now, it's being swallowed up by a couple of the things that you don't necessarily want. You've got the predominant area is this purple, but it's kind of swallowing up this picture, and it's swallowing up some of the cool colors that you're playing around with behind here. Doing something to make this pop out just a little bit more, different contrast and stuff, and maybe not having it against the purple might be another way to do it. So I definitely work on trying to make this part pop a little bit more. And then on the back with the photos, I would probably include a couple other photos, or do something so that you can break them up so that they're not all exactly the same size. Since they're all exactly the same size, it makes them feel kind of bland. And I really want to emphasize, I mean, there's so many cool things that are happening inside of the photos. Bland is definitely not what you're looking for. Right now, it's like a column of text and photo, column of text and photo. And then your drop cap sizes are different. I would include the drop cap only in one spot, not both. And then I wouldn't have the titles on top of this, because what it does is it makes it feel like this is one article, that this is one article, and that this is one article. So if I were to break this up into pieces, it essentially looks like so there's not much contrast that's on there to really add some oomph and some impact. So I would duplicate this spread and then experiment with deciding, what do I really want people to see? If I really want them to see these two pictures, make them giant and then run this text so that it is a little bit smaller. And then I'm not sure what your thought was here. I don't know if that's going to be the pull quote or what the deal is there, but I would definitely play around with that. All right, let's take a look here. Okay, for this one, really love this half of the spread. I think this is really nice. Just add the N in there, so it's the unknown half of America. This part's really strong. I think this is nice. I would want to use this red in other places. One of the things, I was playing around with this already. One of the things that you may want to do is bleed the photo all the way up to the top, so that basically this entire portion is the photo. So it goes all the way up, and then that will have a heavier visual impact. And then once you've got this, now you're going to end up having this separated into several different boxes. So they start to feel a little funky. You may want to reserve this one, maybe have more than one photo on this side, although it may compete too much, by having another photo. Maybe it's something like that, or this is reversed so that those photos are down here, and then your article begins up here, but just something to kind of break up that beginning portion. And then what I would do is I would utilize that red. I think that red is really strong here. Maybe put it in the headers, maybe on this side, instead of having this border going around this entire outside, maybe putting that up towards the edge and making it thicker or something, just to bring it away from here, because that thickness of that text, the thickness of the border really starts to run into the text a little too much. So I'd be careful with that. And then see if there's a way that you can shrink this down so it'll fit on one line. Because if you notice, that empty space is really, really big. So once I take this away, you'll start to notice the empty spaces. There's a huge funky gap there. Big gap, big gap. Try to see if you can get that onto one line and bring it a little bit closer to the text. Maybe include a couple of the other photos or go much, much larger with a couple of the photos that you really want to emphasize. Like, I mean, this is just, wow. And breaking this up, because you've got this as one column and then this is one long chunk of text. So definitely I would see about adding some other photos or going much larger so we can kind of fill in some of these spaces so that this becomes one picture package where it's multiple photos connected together as opposed to three separated big gap photos. So you've got a lot of the good raw ingredients. Now it's a matter of just kind of taking some of the things that are working really well, like this color, love that. And this, the way you've got this structured, the title looks really nice. And then trying to see what you can do to bring that over into some of the other pages. Okay, so with this one, I don't really have a ton that I can give you feedback on because there's not a lot here to work with. So I'm going to hold off on giving feedback on that one. If you've got more work done, you want me to take a look at it, awesome. But I'm concerned because we've been working on this for over a week and you've got 2 photos.